Tell me where the idea of the book Traveling Different comes from, and why did you decide to write it?
No, great. Well, I just wanted to say that the full title, so people understand, is Traveling Different Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. I was born into a travel family, so I've been traveling since I was 2. And considering I was born in the dark ages, it's been a long time. And so I've been traveling internationally. I mean, I just wasn't about to give up traveling. And I've worked as an editor, like either a contributing editor or a senior editor for 4 major travel trade publications. So when I had children, I expected them to love to travel,
Yeah.
and they were not as fond of it as I was. They were not really good with transitions. They weren't good with smells and changes and things that I just didn't expect. They were definitely anxious and inflexible. And so I started looking for some answers because I believe that there's a book for any problem you have. And unfortunately, this book didn't exist, so I had to write it. So I started by interviewing some people who were very well known, such as Dr. Tony Atwood, who's fairly well known in autism circles. Dr. Ellen Littman is well known in ADHD circles. Dr. Atwood is actually out of Scotland and Australia, so not American, whereas Dr. Littman is. And then I kind of hit a wall and I didn't know where to go to write the rest or interview the rest. And it wasn't until an organization called IBCCES came out with a designation called the Certified Autism Travel Professional designation that I knew how to write the book, because I knew those people had had intense training on how to work with people on the spectrum and people with invisible disabilities. And they introduced me to their parents, many their clients who are special needs parents. Many of the autism travel professionals are also special needs parents. So I got a lot of the information I needed that way. And I also, conducted over 100 interviews, including advocates and allies of the various disorders. And then I had a 2-year pandemic where I couldn't leave the house. Unlike anybody else, I had 2 years I had to stay at home.
Yeah.
And I had to do something. So I wrote 4 books, and this was one of them.
Great. So you're drawing on your own personal experiences as well as quite a
Very
lot of
little,
research. Not on your own
of
experience.
my own, very little of mine. I mean, this is what prompted me, but this is not my story whatsoever. I mean, I have a
Okay.
couple of anecdotes in the book, but it's the experts that are talking, not
Okay.
me.
Okay. So if somebody was to um get the book when it's released and they're looking for the answers, they've got some difficulties of their own when they plan to travel, or maybe they've only done one trip and it's put them off, that kind of thing. What can they expect to find from the book?
Well, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there was a survey done by IBCCES recently of 1,000 special needs parents. And of those, 87% refused to travel. They just won't do it. And of those, 93% would travel if they knew where to go and what to do.
Okay.
So what you're going to find in the book is information on how to introduce the child to the concept of travel, how to prepare to the nth degree, because you can never over prepare when you're working with children, either on or off the spectrum, how to plan a child-centric vacation, how to travel safely. All of this information can work as well for neurotypical children as it can for neurodiverse, because every child, when they're taken out of their comfort zone, becomes anxious and inflexible, which is why I titled it the way I did.
Yeah.
So those travel tips work for everyone. I've broken it up by mode of transportation. So you've got air, car, bus, train, cruise, then where to stay, including camping, houseboats, as well as vacation rentals and hotels. And then types of tours that you might take or venues you might visit, special interest venues, and then a list of resources at the end.
So it's very much broken down into each category of
Yeah.
if you're planning a road trip, then this is what we're saying you should do and or you can do, and if you're planning to camp or stay in a hotel. These are the other areas as well. That'd
Right.
be very helpful, specifically to say we're traveling by train and we're going to camp.
Yeah. So I really felt that no one was going to read this from beginning to end. Uh, so yeah, you can pick and choose what you want to read. You probably want to read the first several chapters just to know how to introduce the child to travel, but then how you're getting there, where you're staying, and what you're doing when you get there.
Okay. So if we were speaking to one of the families that from your research that says they definitely wouldn't travel, or as my example, that they might have tried it once and it was a bit of a failure and they thought we're not doing that again. What would be the tips that you would, you know, firsthand just throw out there and give to me if you could? I know it's got to be specific around that child, but
That's true. Yeah, every child is different. And in the 344 pages of the book, I would say that the overriding tips are to give yourself a break because everything's going to be trial and error. The idea is to, if you put these techniques, and there's always backup plans because like you said, every child is different. So I don't list just one technique, but if this doesn't work, maybe this will. That if you use the preparation and making the unfamiliar familiar to the child, then you'll ward off a lot of the tantrums, because the reason most families won't travel is because they're afraid that their child will have a sensory meltdown, and then people will judge them. They'll judge them as bad parents, the child is a brat, when none of that is true. And they're so frightened about what people will think, instead of realizing that this is a big world and you're entitled to see it, no matter who you are or what disorder your child might have. And there are ways to work with it. So I teach how to start small, and that can be buying picture books that the child will read or look at, that features their favorite characters in travel situations. Or it might be role play, or it might be watching videos of any part or all parts of the trip you're about to take. Because of technology, that's all available. Because what you want to do, children crave routine and familiarity. And there's nothing that'll drag them out of their comfort zone more than travel, because all of it's unfamiliar. So you want to create some predictability and some positive frame of reference for them. So when you're seeing the video, you're saying, this is what the airport's going to be like. This is what the plane is going to be like. This is what check-in at the hotel is going to be like. So that all of it's familiar and they recognize it when they get there. And that's why it's important to think the whole thing through from beginning to end. So you can always plan for anything that might come up that could be a trigger for the child. And I also believe in creating mini experiences in advance. So before you go to a hotel and spend thousands to stay in a strange place, why not take the child to a friend's house or a relative's house for one night and have them experience sleeping in a bedroom that's not theirs? Because that's where you're going to see the triggers that will arise. Maybe they need their own blankets and sheets from home with the familiar texture and scent, and don't wash them ahead of time because you want the scent that they're used to. Some parents say don't wash the clothes before the trip so that it smells like from home. And you'll know whether the child needs, say, a night light or a fan to drown out the noise from the hallway, or the toiletries that they're used to from home. So you're going to know that in advance because you did a sample trip. Before you take a long road trip across the country, maybe take a short one. Before you take a rail trip around the country, maybe take a commuter line. You can go from London to Brighton, which is something I've done many times in my life. So all these things you can do, go to a local zoo or an aquarium before you take a sightseeing tour.